I was on Pinterest the other day. Typical 11 p.m. What am I doing with my life? I need to get myself together. Reading through inspirational quotes, standard fare. I'm literally looking at it now, like everything you can imagine. Inaction out of fear is worse than failure in action. You have the power to end these things, and it's just a gecko staring at me, disappointed. What else was there? Never force, always flow, and it's just a monk dripped out with an iced out wristwatch. The price of authenticity is rejection. You must learn to proceed with certainty, yada, 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 yada. And then I came upon one, and it says, I'll put it on the screen actually, like up here, but basically it just said, when a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure, which obviously a bit ironic given what I was doing at the time, but it really started to get me thinking. And it reminded me again, just in my life, of how much philosophy and art has intersected, how much I've got from art, why art has been so important to me, the things it's made me feel and understand about myself and about life more generally. And then that got me thinking, there's got to be a lot of good stuff to learn from philosophy. The typical office girly, corporate girly that I am, and where productivity is the only thing that matters. I don't really care about reading a book. I haven't got time. So why don't I just ask Claude to tell me what the top 10 most influential philosophical breakthroughs are, and then I can just break this down into things that I can learn for my life. So I did that. And again, it started spinning its cogs on the random letter generator, as it does. And then it started listing, and it brought up number 1, which was the Socratic Method. For anyone who doesn't know, the Socratic Method is basically just systematic questioning in order to uncover the truth. In Claude's own words, basically, what was the foundation of critical thinking and Western intellectual inquiry? And this is going to sound maybe really dumb, but I was just kind of sat there for a second like, do they mean questions? Like questioning. Are you telling me like people didn't just ask questions back in the day? And the answer is yes. They basically didn't. Truly, like the trust that these guys, these early humans had in the universe, the gods, whatever guy had come in with a stone and saying something was like Bible, like unparalleled, okay? The faith that these guys had in this, you couldn't parallel it. I was speechless. They just didn't question things. Not in the way that you or I neurotically do. I should probably put a little side note here and say to all the people being like, what are you talking about? Obviously they did question things. Yes, okay, yes, for context, there were thinkers and questions before Socrates, and they were called like pre-Socratic teachers, and they definitely still did ask about the universe and what makes up things and why do they act that way. But for the point of this video, my point is really more about the fact that people just generally, as early humans, accepted in society the things that happened and didn't question why we were doing things. Why was this ritual this way? Why did we believe in this person? How does something work? Versus just like the utility and the relationship they had with the thing itself. People's relationship to the natural world was more important than their like understanding of it, if that makes sense. Like their relationship in that moment, rather than like how they understood it. It was almost like a two-way partnership between you and the universe and the world. So basically it was like the default mode. And ancestral practice was just self-evidently correct and accepted. There's kind of a couple of reasons for this. So first one being the theory of the bicameral mind. That's basically the theory that early humans lived a totally different consciousness from us. So their waking state was very different. They faced really intense, immediate survival fears and stresses. So they probably experienced a more dreamlike awareness than the one we have today, especially because they were so stressed. So I guess a good point here is if you are being neurotic or you're stuck in a spiral, perhaps the thing is to just start moving in action. Go do something. Go clean the kitchen. Go have a shower. Go splash your face with water. What is someone going to think about me? Like, how am I going to be okay? Like, how is this going to impact my status in society? You didn't really have any of that. You were too busy avoiding predators, surviving harsh climates, just warding off disease. So that probably sounds a really horrifying and untempting period of life to live in. But indigenous cultures and pre-Socratic societies did have something over us, and that was the fact that they had this relationship to experience that was so different. One of the biggest things they had, and I'll explain a bit more in the video why Western philosophy has lost this more recently, is something called participation over observation. So back in the day, you just felt a closer sense of being embedded in the world rather than necessarily standing back and watching the world and being an observer. And of course, that felt much less lonely because you weren't a subject that was analysing an object. Everything around you mattered and was connected to you as one kind of like living fabric. So animals, weather, the ancestors that lived before you, even your own dreams or things that you didn't have in your waking life. And the other thing that these cultures also had was ritual as a meaning without explanation. So kind of what I was saying before, which is like people just accepted things. You don't need to understand how a ritual works in order to feel its effects. So in the same ways, you don't need to understand the biological mechanisms of paracetamol to enjoy some pain relief. You can just carry meaning in a ritual by doing it. So in the act of being in your body, repeating the ritual, having the community around you, the seasons that you repeat, you didn't need some kind of justification as to why you did it, okay? Just felt good. But then Socrates came along. So suddenly there was this whole new burden of justification. So you had to justify why you experienced anything in the way that you did. And it wasn't just Socrates. So after Socrates, there was also a couple of other movements. So in the Western world, in the 17th century, the emergence of the scientific method, which gave us a structured framework, basically how to debate something. 100 years later, you also had the Enlightenment, which was basically where philosophers dared people to question things even more. So again, democratized our ability to think because this movement challenged well-established religious and political thought. People could start having a bit more freedom to question even more without just sort of being burdened by these societal previous holders of truth. This Western framework has basically trained us to see unresolved uncertainty as a failed state. Every bit of uncertainty is a problem that we're supposed to be solving, but that's impossible. You're not going to know the future. You're not going to know about death. You're not going to be able to understand everything. That is an illusion. It's an illusionary sense of control. It's not possible. And by many people's standards, that'd be a completely irrational way to spend your time trying to sort of grasp things that you're never going to understand the reasoning to. The other thing on top of that the Socratic tradition did was that it carried forward this idea that the questioner exists. So basically you are the rational unit responsible for continually improving yourself. That sounds like really nice on the surface, but it does leave you with this feeling, or at least it has in my life, of feeling like permanently on trial. I never know the right amount to be questioning myself on if I should have done something a certain way. And like everything that you do then can have or should have a rational justification. There's no rest from examining everything that you do. And what I think we need to be taking from these previous pre-Socratic cultures is this idea that selfhood was actually, or the sense of self was more relational and collective. Like you are who you are, not because of the way that you examine yourself, but in relation to your community, your ancestors, your land, the space that you occupied. So you can see really quickly how this simple idea of questioning became more and more a way of life for us. The real problem is that when you start creating a culture that demands reasons for everything, you start losing such a wealth of human experience that ultimately can't be labeled or narrowed down or explained. Because if you start saying that the framework of the way that we're going to view the world is if you can't explain something, then it isn't real, then you're going to start suspecting your own experience of the world. And that is extremely anxiety making. There's a kind of wisdom in sitting with the sky and just letting it be magnificent without having to immediately dissect it. Like, that's what our ancestors did, you know. They didn't know how many light years away a particular bright speck in the sky was, or how many gallons of fuel that big red circle was that was burning in the sky. But that never got in the way of this relationship that they had when they looked up into the night sky and found so much comfort when they were lost and they were tired at the end of a long day, or even when they were just talking to their children and telling them stories of the gods that lived among the stars. All that matters is that experience and relational exchange between the two. Explanation and knowledge doesn't make life any more real or beautiful, or isn't going to make the relationship that you have to that thing any easier or harder or different. I can think back to so many times in my own life where I've been so desperately stuck in therapy, like in cycles, just trying to analyze why I was treated a particular way, like instead of understanding that sometimes I'm not going to have the answer, and that may actually be enough. That might actually explain your own human experience. Like, that's okay. For some reason, I just thought if I could know the reasoning, it would all make sense, okay? It would make my suffering okay. And in that same way that ancient humans didn't really think about or dissect like the sky, I think it's important to know that knowing something more is not going to make something easier to process, or isn't going to make. And I think it's good sometimes when things are shrouded in more mystery, and also sometimes when you can't figure something out instantly and it isn't black and white. Like, I find that fascinating. I find that really juicy. I think that we should want things to be shrouded in a little bit of mystery, okay? Side note, but I don't need to know your whole life on Instagram. I just didn't need to know that like your boyfriend is like comfortable enough with you that he waxes down there. Like, I didn't need to know that. Okay. Socrates didn't die for that. Or did he die for that? I think maybe he did die for that. Also, I think that all of the great moments in life and great cultural moments that we talk about are things that were always shrouded in a little bit of mystery. Yeah, I just wish we appreciated more that ancient civilizations had this different kind of intelligence, and that's just as important as knowing things. And this act of like questioning something or just tearing it down to its bare meat and bones, I just feel like it is high and mighty. It's like a commoditization of knowledge. Who are we to deserve the access to such knowledge? The way that things like OpenAI are going, don't take my word for it, that is the kind of pressure that we're living in. What is considered psychotic or neurotic or overthinking is just often shaped heavily by culture. I think my point is more generally around accepting things as they are and not expecting that there's some end to your line of questioning that will finally make everything okay or explain the awe that you're feeling in that moment. If you were questioning, you kept questioning, like, why does a flower look white? And then you find that it's because it doesn't have a particular pigment in it. And then you start questioning, why doesn't it have a particular pigment in it? Oh, because it doesn't grow in this particular climate. And why did it originally grow in this particular climate? Or why did it tend towards this particular climate? And you keep going and going and going and going, and it could be endless. And that explanation and knowledge of the flower doesn't make life any more real than the experience you have just looking at it and how you feel about it. So I think the most important thing is that next time you start questioning yourself, why am I thinking this? What am I doing? Why don't you ask yourself, why am I even questioning this at all?
Hi guys, editing Piper here. I realized that this video is super cluttered and could be way more organized, but please give me credit. It's genuinely my first video I've ever shot on this channel. So I wanted to really quickly put an aside here for anyone who felt a bit like, what are the learnings from this video, or find it harder with my waffling, as I can understand. Basically to just summarize the things that we can learn from the early humans. So I've written in my notes here. The first kind of point that I was talking about was, if you want to stop anxiety or thinking too much, definitely get out of your head and go do something or take action. The second point is that you should remind yourself that narcissism or overthinking or the reasons why we think so much is shaped really heavily by our culture in this day and age. So definitely something that might help is surrounding yourself with people who are really grounded and really calm, and yeah, don't get sucked into drama or sort of overthinking energy. My third point was again about how some things that early humans had was rituals without sort of explanation. So I would suggest doing rituals just because they feel good, and don't basically make a prerequisite for doing something to have some kind of like scientific explanation. You can just practice something because it feels good for you, which I guess is my fourth point, which is practice listening to your inner feelings and not judging them and just accepting what works for you. And it might not be something that works for other people, and that's totally fine. And then number five is, if you can't explain what you're feeling, that's okay. Mystery can make things way more fun and way more whimsical. And think back to things in your life or stories or films or big pop culture moments that you've really enjoyed. They've all probably been involving some form of mystery or not understanding something. And the game is up sometimes when you know something. So it's okay to just let something be amazing or give you a sense of awe. And you shouldn't swap that feeling just because you want to understand something necessarily. The final thing is, remember that you are living in a Western framework that makes you think that uncertainty is something that you can eradicate. And it's something that we should be aiming to eradicate. But I would really suggest learning about Eastern philosophy or other religions or methods that help you practice and remove the need for certainty in your life. And which is what a lot of Eastern philosophy does. It looks at removing false certainties rather than just removing all certainty or trying to find certainty in everything, let's say. So, in other words, the whole purpose of the video, I guess, is find a way to be comfortable in discomfort and the idea of not knowing something.